When he started turning the submarine, the steering broke, leaving the submarine now turned so its entire side is now facing this convoy. One of the larger ships struck the side of the submarine, immediately flooding their forward torpedo room. And for a brief second, the submarine and the ship were kind of mangled together, and then it slipped off the ship and it sunk all the way to the bottom, 18 meters down. The captain, along with the other 3 men that were up on the bridge with him when they were struck, they managed to leap out at the last second and were treading water when this all happened. As for the other 34 crew members, they were stuck inside when it sunk. A number of the crew had been sleeping at the time of the crash, and so all they felt was this crash, the power goes out, they leap out of their beds, and they're landing in waist-deep water, and they're running out into the halls kind of fumbling around because they can't see anything, and all they can hear is the sound of water pouring inside of their submarine. And so these sailors had gone through all sorts of drills to prepare for this type of scenario where, power's out and you're sinking, and so they know by touch how to get to the one area that has an escape hatch, which is the engine room. And after 20 of them got inside the engine room, the water levels in the hallway were getting so high that it was spilling into that room, and it was getting to the point where if they didn't seal the door, they were going to flood this one room that was their only chance of survival. And so they had to make the heartbreaking decision to lock and seal that door, meaning the 14 other sailors on the other side, if they hadn't already died, were now condemned. But for the 20 men who now were going to be able to use this escape hatch, there was no guarantee that would work. Because to use the escape hatch on a submarine, you need to understand how it works. You can't just open a hatch on a submarine. It won't open. The pressure from the seawater presses down on it to where it literally cannot open. You might be able to open it a crack if you use a tool, but that's about it. In order to open the escape hatch, you need to use something called a lockout chamber. And so a lockout chamber is like this really tight claustrophobia-inducing thing that looks an awful lot like a gas chamber, where you step through one hatch and you shut it and you seal it so it's watertight, and then above you is your escape hatch. But you can't open it until the pressure inside of the chamber has been equalized. And the way they do that is they flood the inside of the chamber the escapee is in. And so you're standing inside of this tight space, totally sealed in, and there's a control panel inside the chamber itself and also inside the sub, if you're lucky enough to have someone do that for you. You turn on the chamber, at which point water is dumped inside of this tight space you're in until it's completely full and you're holding your breath, at which point you've now equalized. The pressure inside the chamber is equal to that outside, and you can actually open the hatch. So the person inside on a breath hold undoes the hatch, opens it up, and then hopefully your swim isn't too far because you're already on a breath hold, and you swim to the surface. And during World War II, submariners were outfitted with a special piece of equipment if they ever needed to leave via the escape hatch, and it was their Davis escape gear, which is basically this life jacket that's uninflated, and when you manually activate it, it suddenly inflates, and so when you go through that hatch, you would activate it, and it would assist you to get to the surface. And so after those 20 sailors had decided to seal off the engine room, they immediately shifted focus and began getting guys into the escape hatch, and one of their most junior sailors, a guy by the name of Killian, said he would stay inside the room and operate the control panel so everybody else had the best chance of getting out of the escape hatch. And so sure enough, he put all 19 into the hatch and he got them out of the submarine, and then he, on his own, had to get in the hatch, seal it himself, and control the panel in total darkness, flood the space, open it up, and shoot to the surface. He would live, and he would be awarded the British Empire Medal for bravery. One junior officer named Edward Jones was one of the 14 men that did not get to the engine room before they sealed it off. And when he got there and realized the situation, he turned around and looked down the hall, and there were only 3 other men that were standing there, and he didn't know how many had made it in the engine room. He figured this was the only 4 that had not made the cut. But in fact, there was actually 10 other people that were just stuck in various places inside of the submarine. But Jones decided he only had these guys in front of him, and so he said, "Hey, come with me, I have an idea." As Jones led them down this hallway, the water levels had risen up to their necks, and all these circuits on the walls were starting to spark all around them. And so Jones led them to the middle of the submarine, and then he turned and went up into the control room. And then from the control room, he went even farther up into what's called the conning tower. The conning tower is a submarine's main attack center. It's where you have those periscopes they look around in, and it also has the firing buttons for their torpedoes. It is not designed to be an escape hatch, because once you flood the conning tower, there's no control panel like there is on an escape hatch to drain the water that was used to equalize in order to open the hatch. So once the water water's in, it's either you get to the surface or you drown. Also, in order to exit out of the conning tower, you need to go through this very narrow tube that goes straight up, and it's got a ladder through it that can barely fit one person climbing up, meaning the people at the bottom of the ladder will have to hold their breath a lot longer than the people at the top. So Jones and the other 3 sailors, they get to the conning tower and they seal the hatch at their feet, so blocking the hallway flood from coming into where they are. And they realize that even though they have to do this, there are no other alternatives here, that realistically 1 or 2 or more are going to die in the process of just trying to get out of the submarine. But it was all they could do, so they made peace with their decision. They climbed up and they opened the hatch just enough to let water come in, but quite a bit started coming in. The men wedged themselves as high up in the tunnel as they possibly could, but obviously not everybody could get all the way up to the hatch. And so 2 were down low, and Edward Jones and 1 other were up towards the top. And Jones would say that at first they were talking and praying, and then when they started feeling the water get closer and closer to their heads, they went silent. And then Jones remembers keeping his hand on the 1 man that was below him, and when his hand was wet, he knew the 2 men below him were completely submerged. And then the water came up to his face, covered his head, and at that point he opened it up and they swam out. Of the 4 men in the conning tower, only Edward Jones and the other guy who was high up in the tunnel with him made it to the surface. All told, only 14 of the 38 total crew survived the accident.